transformation, how industries and how business models are changing, and some of the technology that underlies that. I live and work here. I'm responsible for the marketing and the operation of the Microsoft Vietnam team. We have offices in Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh, and I've lived in both. And so it's been interesting for me to see different parts of Vietnam during the time. The overall title for this is about systems of intelligence. So I'll kind of break that apart a little bit as I go through this. But it's really how those systems of intelligence are changing businesses, but also driving growth, as we've talked a lot about today. As we've heard from a lot of the speakers, technology has changed society in many ways. Many of those that I'll mention today have not yet been mentioned, but one of the key ways it's happening is how sensors and new types of devices are creating data. So everybody's talked about smartphones before, but there are many other types of new technology. One of those are wearables. So I have a wearable made by Microsoft with a sensor that has about 10 sensors in this device. And it's doing all kinds of things like my heart rate, how much I move, my elevation, even how much sun I might be getting with the UV sensor. All of that data is being collected by this little device. Where that data goes in is into a cloud service that I can see and track. And over time, these types of devices will be able to tell us lots of interesting things about our health through big data that we haven't been able to tell before. There's a version of this type of device that's used on cows. And cows walk around with a device like this, and it tracks their steps. It tracks how much they sleep. It tracks perhaps how much, when they walk around, when they don't walk around. And with that data, through big data, machine learning, these terms that you probably read about, they can identify 10 different diseases within a cow. And so that's just one way that these types of devices are changing our society and how we work and our industries. It's not just about a smartphone. It's not just about some personal device. Now, I don't know how many diseases I have yet from this device, but someday I hope that I can learn from this device to tell me more about how healthy I am through the data that's collecting about me. All of those trends, and whether it's IoT or cloud or wearables, these are all new types of technology that are changing business models. One of the things that was asked was, look at some of the data, as we prepared for this session, look at some of the data of how this is changing, so that it's not just inevitable, but really what people are looking at. The first thing about transformation and business transformation is this is not really about technology. This is really about the culture, as we've heard a lot today about how organizations work. There's also an opportunity for new skills to be developed, and I love some of the sessions before that focused on learning and skills, and the new opportunities that Vietnam has within these new digital economy skills, whether that's data scientists or that's other types of new jobs that didn't exist 5 years ago. This is an interesting one just around looking for people with both a tech background and a business background. That combination of those skills is where innovation often happens. When domains get mixed together, as we talked about, as we heard before, that's where innovation happens. And I like this one about CEOs looking for data scientists, trying to decide how much do they invest in data scientists to understand how their business is changing. Another one is just looking at how much is going to be learned from this data and how these businesses will be changing quickly. This one about machine learning and AI is another one. How much will businesses be shifting their software to machine learning and AI? Not just writing software or apps, but incorporating new services like AI into them. Microsoft is also going through a major transformation. You have obviously read about our company over the last number of years. You've read about our new CEO, Satya. And you know that our mission is really to empower individuals and organizations all over the planet to achieve more. We are about empowering businesses and individuals. That is also why we have a business model of living and working in many, many countries around the world. And so some of what we see and that ability to look across countries also helps us to work better within a specific country. Part of our role then is also to help influence the policies and the decisions that are made at pretty high levels about building a software ecosystem here in the country. And that's an important one to think about development, not just about our personal business, but about the entire ecosystem of high tech within Vietnam. When we look at our business model, we look at creating more personal computing. That's things like Skype Translator that can translate between 8 different languages on the fly in a video conference. I can speak English to someone who's Chinese, and Skype will translate that for us in a video call. Someone who is Arabic speaking can speak to someone in Chinese, and that can be translated through the call. Chat now works in 50 languages, more than 50 languages. And you can test this. You can go chat in English on Skype, and you can chat with your friend in Vietnamese, and Skype will translate that chat. It's incredible new ways of computing and interacting that we never had before, breaking down the barriers of language. When we look at Intelligent Cloud, I'll spend a bit of time sharing some stories of customers here in Vietnam, but also around the world, about how they're improving their business and their business transformation through things like the cloud. And I'll talk about, at the end, a little bit about how that's affected Microsoft and our own business. And of course, inventing productivity, reinventing that to be across every device, any kind of mobility scenario, so that it's not just about our platform. And in digital transformation, I'll move next into looking at this from an industry perspective. And the questions I have for you, and I'd love to focus on learning so far, how is your business being digitally transformed? That's your specific organization. How is your industry and your business model within that industry being transformed? And then your reflections on today. What is one learning that you have today? If you had to summarize, what is one thing that you would learn today? And then what is one action that you would take today? I've written like 4 pages of notes from all the speakers so far today. A lot of great stuff. And it's great just to think about how do we put that into action after a day like today. To summarize how we talk about this and how we talk with customers and partners about digital transformation and how we tell our own story of how our company is changing is we have this called a system of intelligence. And that's a systems view of how these pieces work together. We can look at engaging our customers. We can look at transforming our products. We can look at optimizing our operations. And lastly, empowering our employees. And this ties in very nicely to the last session. It was really talking about how do we engage our employees in different ways. What's connecting all of these pieces is data. It's not just time and energy. It's actually data that is connecting these different pieces. So like the feedback that was talked about before, we're getting feedback from customers that then help us understand how we need to change our products, how we need to change how we work with our employees differently, and how we might change operations. And that's a connected experience across those things, empowered by things like these sensors, like IoT devices. One quick example of that, and you see a number of examples across every industry. I'll focus on just a few industries as I go through a few examples now. But you see different examples of all these businesses. Having Uber here is a great example in transportation of how a business model can be changed very, very, very quickly with new technology. Airbnb is another one that's often talked about when we come to hospitality. It's an incredibly different business model that didn't exist just a few years ago. That technology has enabled that change. And many of you can think about your own industries and organizations about how fast this change is happening. In the first one, engaging our customers, there's a specific piece here around, you might have heard these things around bots or conversations as platforms. This is an area to just keep an eye out on in technology and how fast this will change, about using AI, artificial intelligence, and how we interact with organizations in a different way. For instance, when you interact with an organization, most of that could actually be happening between AI over Skype before you actually talk to a human person. Maybe 80% of that could happen over Skype with AI. Maybe 90%, maybe 100%. It depends on what we're trying to accomplish and what needs to be done. But these conversations as platforms, bots, other companies like Facebook will talk about them, are a very, very important change that's happening recently that you'll see a lot more of. One example of this was Virgin Atlantic, a big airline. They wanted to use technology in a different way to get more information about their customers. And while I may talk about Windows 10 on this slide, it's actually important to really recognize this is cross-platform. This could be Android devices, this could be iOS, this could be Windows. It doesn't really matter. What's powering this in the background is a cross-platform service that can collect that data, analyze that data, and then provide the right recommendation to the people who are working most closely with the customers. And I like this too because it's also an important statement from, again, how we empower organizations, how we are simply a partner to organizations. Another one is a local one, and this is a local bank here, VP Bank. They are working on really employee engagement and how they can help that process. And I love the question before about how they're engaging employees. In this one, they're using one of our cloud-based solutions to engage employees in a different way, specifically through enterprise social, a product called Yammer. It's a way for people to connect in local language with people that have similar roles or have similar goals. And it's a way for them to change how they interact with their employees. And I love this quote from the CEO, Mr. Bin. It's about enabling their organization to achieve this type of efficiency. And that's just one example of how we can work closely with organizations here in Vietnam because we're here. Another bank recently, OCB, just announced a couple weeks ago that they're also moving to this platform. So those are just two public references. We have many more that are not public, but that are private, that are also moving in this direction or have already moved. And so it's important to see the momentum behind this and certainly the trends that we're seeing. One example is from an insurance company. This is an insurance company that operates here in Vietnam. This example comes from another country. And it's really about how optimizing their operations could be achieved in different ways, specifically around disaster recovery. There have been a number of very public cases here in Vietnam where operations have been taken completely offline through ransomware or through other types of security issues. And in this example, they were able to move their recovery time from days to minutes and to reduce the cost of that. And that's an important scenario. If you think about, hey, if your servers went offline today, how long would it take you to get back up and running from a backup? Are your operations resilient enough to get back up and running in minutes? And in most cases, no. Right? In most cases, no. And so it's a challenge to all of us to think about how quickly can we get back to serving customers and partners with our business operations. The last one in this category is around transforming your products, and I really like this one because of the potential it has for Vietnam. This is an example of a software company, Temenos. They make core banking software run by a lot of banks here in Vietnam and many banks around the world. And they're moving that into our cloud in order to expand their market more quickly and also to be much more reactive to changes in compliance and so forth. There was a question earlier about some of the high-tech startups here in Vietnam. And this is one that I am most passionate about, is seeing more of the startups in Vietnam be able to put their solutions as they build them into a cloud like ours so that they can expand to other markets much, much faster. If you're building one here, you can actually run it for ASEAN. You can run it for the world. There is no more limitations with this type of platform that would keep a company here in Vietnam from developing for the rest of the world. And many of the biggest employers of engineers and developers are actually international firms that are building software here in Vietnam, and they're exporting it to other parts of the world. And there's an incredible opportunity for local companies to do just that, and building in a similar way to what we're seeing here. So in closing, I just want to tie back to a couple things in terms of how Microsoft transformation has been seen here. Number one, hopefully you've seen a different type of attitude from our leadership team and certainly locally here as we work in a very different way. One of that ways is from a technology perspective. I have a slide I won't show today, which is all of the open source things that we run on Azure. We just announced a SUSE partnership yesterday. If anyone knows what that is, you'll understand it's important. We have an Oracle partnership that runs on Azure. We have Linux that runs on Azure, PHP. We have all of this open source technology that can run in our cloud. It's a very different attitude than we might have had a few years ago. We also have different partnership models that we're working very closely with new types of partners here in Vietnam. And that's an important one as we think about how to expand the market here, but also how to develop that ecosystem in Vietnam. And lastly, when we think about how our standards or security standards follow, we have international standards of ISO and so forth with many governments around the world to ensure that privacy and and data compliance is maintained throughout all of these services. And that's just part of the trust that comes along with being part of this industry and part of this transformation. So with that, thank you for your time, and I look forward to our questions and our panel discussion later on today. Thank you.